Part 1. Chapter 1, Changing Perspective. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. Victor E. Frankl. If human history is any indication, we know one thing for certain. We will always defend the things we believe in, even if those beliefs came from other people or childhood experiences. They may be far under the surface, but the brain will work incredibly hard to defend the beliefs ingrained there. Our beliefs help us to make sense of the world. They help us to structure how we live our life. Maybe you were taught one specific way to wash dishes. I cannot count how many times I have reloaded the dishwasher after someone else loaded it the wrong way. Some beliefs are simple, like your one way to wash dishes or fold towels. Fun fact, in the book Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, she explains that the researcher Virginia Satir found that there are 250 ways to wash the dishes. The way we do it was probably instilled at a very young age, before the brain has any real concept of these things, along with millions of other beliefs about how the world is supposed to work. Beliefs are often overlooked when deciding to change a lifestyle practice. However, some might argue that the belief systems one has in place can dramatically affect whether or not that person will succeed in making any positive life changes. It has been said a million times before in a million different ways, but I believe Henry Ford said it best. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. In 2015, I was diagnosed with celiac disease and Hashimoto's thyroiditis in the same month. These diagnoses began to eat at my mind. Within a matter of days, I developed an incredible anxiety to food, grocery stores, and especially restaurants. I began to think of my body as the enemy. It was somehow working against me. I had such incredibly toxic thoughts about the process of my body breaking down. I couldn't help wondering, how could this be happening to me? I regularly said, my body hates me, to anybody who asked how I was doing. I continued to wallow in self-pity. None of the health interventions I tried made any difference. I read every book I could on physical and mental healing, as well as books about personal journeys through the same inferno. I came to realize that I would never get better if I remained in this horrible thought loop about my body working against me. As with any new thing I try, I have to learn as much as I possibly can about the topic. From my collective research in the medical and psychological fields, I came to learn that the body has millions of jobs, many that we could never comprehend, and not a single one of those jobs is to kill you. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Its collective mission is to keep you alive, even if that means sending you signal flares like pain and inflammation when it is in need of attention. The biggest change that I had to learn was that my body was always working for me. Any and all signals are for warnings and clues of distress. With this new way of thinking, I was able to create a timeline of events and warning signs. It started small with excess bloating and pain after dairy, low blood sugar in 6th grade, an IBS diagnosis at 16. I was put on antacids and ibuprofen, an anxiety disorder diagnosis at 18, a year-long bout of vertigo at 19, and chronic bladder infections, just to name a few. My body had been sending me tiny warnings all my life, and I never stopped to listen. So my body got louder. When I looked back on the timeline, it is easy to see the disease progression. I clearly see the path my body took to help me to see the signs all along the way. Unfortunately, at the time, I blindly followed only what the doctors told me. I trusted them with my health completely without doing any outside research. Those doctors willingly treated my symptoms and my current complaints with drugs that masked them. Throughout my life, I saw several specialists who took my body apart organ system by organ system without ever consulting anyone else who was treating me. Starting at the age of 15, I was taking several prescription drugs for acid reflux and inflammation. At no point was I asked how I was sleeping or what my diet or mental health or home life was like. The only thing that they could do for me was to treat the issues with drug therapy that quieted the symptoms. Each time I treated one problem, a new one shortly followed in its place. I saw all of this progression as something that was happening to my body, an external thing that could be fixed by taking a prescription. It wasn't until I started to really look back at the domino progression that I saw it was all connected and it was all for my benefit. Every ache and pain after the very first one was a warning, and the warnings were getting louder and louder. I was giving pieces of my puzzle to people who wanted to treat a small part of my much larger whole. When I started to see how hard my body was working for me and not against me, I was finally ready to change my belief systems about my past journey and get a glimpse of what it would take to heal. The action steps for this chapter are to write down the health challenges your parents faced while aging. Also, write down the sayings you grew up hearing about health. For example, don't get old, or your body just falls apart when you get older. Write down how you feel about your body at this moment. So write down those health challenges that your parents faced, because those are going to be things that you heard them say over and over and over again. So that would create a belief system that you would follow and that would carry you through into your own adulthood. So if you're starting to have like the same aches and pains and the same problems that your parents dealt with, it's important to look back and see where that came from. So write down the health challenges your parents faced while they were aging. Write down the sayings you grew up hearing about health, like how we decline or how we get better, or just the aches and the pains, things like that. And lastly, write down how you feel about your body at this moment. Just like brain dump, this is how I feel about my body. And whatever comes out, comes out. And don't judge yourself here, just kind of let it flow. Chapter 2, beliefs. We believe we're seeing the world just fine until it's called to our attention that we're not. David Engelman, Incognito, The Secret Lives of the Brain. I have found that the thing I needed to read, person I needed to meet, or podcast I needed to hear has always found me at exactly the right moment. About a year and a half into my healing journey, I was listening to a podcast episode by Hal Elrod, best-selling author of The Miracle Morning. He was interviewing Tanya Rainier, a mindset coach who helps women in business realize their true potential by breaking down false beliefs and helping to create a solid foundation of self-worth. After listening to Tanya speak, I knew I needed to talk to her. I hired her initially to coach me with the struggles I was having with my business, but quickly I realized that she would help me in ways I couldn't begin to understand. First, she taught me about mindset. Tanya defines mindset as a collection of thoughts, feelings, and beliefs you have about yourself. At the time I'd met her, I had already made huge changes in my lifestyle. I had completely changed my diet. I was following the autoimmune protocol, AIP, sleeping better and exercising in a way that served me best. Basically, I had radically changed my physical environment, but there was more work to do. She helped me see that the way I was thinking and feeling about my body was actually inhibiting healing. We worked one-on-one each week on different aspects of my business, but as Tanya got to know me more, she started to take notes of the words I was using to describe myself. When I was ready, she shared her thoughts about why I was unable to make the shifts I needed to grow. Tanya Rainier, Mindset Coach. We have a set of beliefs about who we are. Our beliefs will dictate how we will live our lives, what type of car or job we will have, and how we will raise families. Having negative beliefs about yourself can very well be the thing that is keeping you from meeting your goals. In order to learn how these beliefs can affect your life, first we have to figure out what they are. Examining and paying attention to the words we use to describe health and life are often good indicators for how we feel about ourselves. Start paying attention and write down any of the words that you use to describe yourself on any given day. After a week or so, look at the list of words and see what types of feelings they provoke in you. Imagine saying those words out loud to a young child. As awareness increases in those areas of your life, the beliefs you carry with you will become clear. When we carry negative beliefs like, I am not good at this because, or I cannot do that because, we are automatically preparing for failure because the choice has been made to do poorly. In order to fully embrace change in any aspect of life, we must first believe that this is something that we are capable of doing. In order to do this, we must practice these facts: that we are worthy of being healthy, then that it's okay to let go of false beliefs that are no longer serving you, and that no matter where you are in your journey, you are loved right now completely. Once you decide this is going to work, then it will be easy. Just believing something can happen can be enough to make it happen. In 2002, researchers from Oxford University set out to support this idea by seeing if they could help raise IQ scores simply by teaching kids to believe it was possible. It is a common belief that IQ scores are fixed. They are largely impacted by things like socioeconomic status, parents' education level, whether there were two parents in the home or more, none of which can be controlled by the child being tested, and often won't change throughout their lifetime. Their results showed that students who believed their IQ scores would improve without any practice did in fact score higher on the IQ test. These researchers and many others are starting to show that simply believing something is possible, and taking steps each day toward the goal can actually be enough to make you successful. This is a practice in mindset. Just as researchers have shown that you can improve by believing it is possible, innumerable amounts of research have shown that if you do not believe you can do something, you will never be able to. Maybe you have been lying to yourself for a long time. Everyone in my family is overweight. That's just the way it is. Or I never ate those foods as a kid and I turned out just fine. Whatever the lie is that you're telling yourself, it has to be let go. Simply by believing you can do it is enough to start. You have to take steps in the right direction, but before you can do any of that, you have to believe that you can. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, the little engine that could. This is all good and well, but how do we actually put it into practice? First, we need to understand the importance of words we use. This may seem like a silly step, and you may be thinking, Sharissa, what could my words possibly have to do with my health? Well, I'm glad you asked. Our brain is so freaking cool. Here's the deal. We are built for both input and output. For example, we can say something aloud, output, and we can also hear, input, the thing that we said, meaning that we can say words and also hear them. The brain then interprets everything we hear without malice or bias. If you say it, hear it, think it, or read it, your brain will take it in and process it in some way. Whoa, that's heavy. Let me break it down a little bit more. If you say something crappy about yourself to a friend, ugh, my legs are so fat. I can never remember anything. I'm always late. That phrase or thought is then input into your brain, and a memory or pathway is created for it. Each time you say it, that pathway becomes stronger and stronger until it is your new belief about yourself. This is an oversimplified example, and most of these beliefs were developed in childhood. Words can either trigger your critique or your inner cheerleader. For example, I am so fat and nothing I ever do works, inner critique, versus I'm working each day to be a little bit healthier, inner cheerleader. The way you talk about yourself to other people is the way you think about yourself. Words become thoughts, may not seem all that bad on the surface, but on a deeper level, the body is responding. Thoughts, whether negative or positive, trigger hormone responses in your body that make you feel what you are thinking. Our thoughts are so powerful that the body doesn't know if a situation is actually occurring at that moment or not. The body's response system acts as if the event or thing you are thinking is actually happening right then. For example, if you are thinking about how grateful you are for your friends and family and life, your body responds by producing serotonin and completing the circle by making you feel all warm and fuzzy inside. The same is true for a bad thought, although the feeling associated with it isn't quite as nice. If you are constantly feeling badly and talking negative about yourself, then your feelings will be negative and the hormones triggered will also be negative. This can trigger feelings of depression, sadness, and loneliness. This is not an environment that fosters healing in the body. Quite contrary, these feelings will make your body feel worse. By changing the words we use to describe ourselves, we can actually adjust how our body responds to stress and healing. It is easy to get trapped in the loop of a bad thought, which causes a bad feeling, which causes you to feel badly, especially if you are saying things like, I will never feel better, I will always be fat, or I will never make any good friends. It isn't easy to change who we believe we are, and doing so takes time. There is a process to understanding where these beliefs came from, and if you have a strong enough desire to change your life, then these steps must be followed. Remember earlier in the book that I said that this is going to be an interactive read? At this point, you get to make a decision. It takes a special type of motivation to go beyond researching and put ideas into practice. In order to get the most out of your life, we must always do both. Filling your Pinterest boards with recipes is a beautiful start, but at some point you actually have to get in the kitchen. It starts with a desire to change and a desire to let go of all the thoughts and beliefs that are no longer serving your life and health. I recommend you get started with the following practice right away. Based on Tanya Rainier's guidance, I have put together some exercises to help you through this process. I have successfully used this practice in all areas of my life. As life is consistently evolving, I find that this exercise I do pretty regularly as any new challenge arises. Mindset challenge. Mindset is how you think and feel about yourself. In order to get a feel for that, think about your health as it is right now. Spend a few minutes doing this exercise and write down some words that come to mind. What reasons do you have, if any, to want to be healthy? 2. If you take the steps to become healthier, physically or mentally, what do you think you will have to give up, and what consequences do you think you will face for changing these things? 3. Now ask yourself what you are putting more value on, the reward of being healthier or the negative consequences that this may have for you. For example, are you worried that if you change too much that you will lose friends or that you will be too different? Take a minute to write down all the bad things that could happen if you changed your life. Next, write a list of positive things that could happen if you were a healthier version of yourself. What things could you do or accomplish? Take a minute to reflect on the things you have written so far. Pay attention to the words you are using. The words you are using about yourself often reflect the thoughts and feelings you have about yourself. Words can be extremely powerful. What words are you currently using to describe your health? Think about the last time someone asked you how you were doing. What was the word you used to describe yourself? What types of thoughts do those words provoke for you? Notice how the words you use to describe yourself make you feel. Think about each word and how it makes you feel, like you have a choice, or that you are trapped. Are you saying things like, I am feeling energetic and I'm taking care of myself with this smoothie. I am really helping myself get better and I am getting healthier. Or are you saying things like, I can't do anything right. I will never be able to do that and it is too hard. Now I want you to dream. Take as much time as you need to think about this one and then write a scenario of getting healthier. Use a separate journal or a paper for this. Include as much detail as you can, such as what places will you visit, clothes will you wear, activities will you do, and people who will be around you supporting you while you're living a full and beautiful life. Think of what would happen if you didn't make any changes at all. Where would you be in 10 years if you continue exactly as you are in this moment? Fear can be so incredibly powerful that oftentimes we choose to stay right where we are, no matter how horrendous the circumstances, because at least we know what we're dealing with. Fear tells us that knowing what is happening right now, even if it is bad, is better than reaching beyond and trying for something better. Whenever I decide to take on a new challenge, I immediately experience fear. I start to get so scared that the bad things will happen if I don't step outside of my comfort zone. I am ashamed to admit that a lot of times this fear has stopped me from trying new things, such as traveling or new adventures. The only advice I have for facing this fear is the advice I follow myself. Love, gratitude, and curiosity will always beat out fear. I find that if I'm struggling with something new, creating an environment in which I can learn as much as I can about it first fires up my curiosity levels just enough that I can take that challenging first step forward toward that scary place. When all else fails, I think of the love I can share with other people if I keep moving myself forward in life. Then love always wins over fear. Action steps. Pay attention to those around you this week and write down all the words you hear people use to describe their current health state. For the same people you heard this week talk about their health, rate their overall current health on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best possible health. Lastly, reflect on the words that other people are using and their health rating, and notice if there are any patterns between their current health and the words that they're using to describe themselves. Chapter 3, Wired This Way. Nothing in the world can bother you as much as your own mind, I tell you. In fact, others seem to be bothering you, but it is not. It's your mind. The Dalai Lama. We are more controlled by our habits than we think. As Chapter 2 illustrated, beliefs that we have about ourselves are instrumental to our ability to change. To take it a step further, attached to those beliefs is a sophisticated web of neural activity pulsing at all times. This system keeps us functioning, but also adds to an inability to make lasting changes. For instance, I know for certain that it isn't a good idea to sit up until 2 a.m. reading my new book and eating M&Ms when I know I have to get up at 6 a.m. to feed my children, and yet I still seem to go against my own better judgment. I proceed then to kick myself right in the behind when I groggily open my eyes to see those sweet faces peering at me in my bed, waiting for me to get up and take care of them. This got me wondering, why is it that good things do not seem to stick? We always start new habits with the best of intentions. All steps to prepare are taken. You get the notebooks, print the food diaries, prep a week's worth of meals. Then, of course, someone calls midweek and asks if you want to try out that new pizza place around the corner that serves wine on tap. How could you say no, especially when just the thought of that gray chicken you boiled on Sunday night with the bland steamed broccoli you've been eating for 3 days straight is making you nauseous? Boom, just like that, your new habit has been broken. Don't be too hard on yourself. This isn't how the brain is wired. The brain will always take the easiest possible path to conserve the most energy. There are thousands of processes happening in the body constantly that fly under the radar. For instance, how often do you think about breathing? Or how many times did you blink today? How many times has your heart beat since this morning? These things often go unthought about. They're just 3 tiny examples of what the brain is controlling. Each movement, each thought, each breath, all are energy being expelled by the body and the brain. This entire book could be filled with the innumerable systems the brain has in place just to digest food. Even though you do not consciously think about these things happening, they do take up quite a bit of time, energy, calories, and mental space. Because of these intense automatic processes, the brain has to find ways to simplify. Can you imagine being in charge of all those tasks all day long? The more we learn about the brain, the more we realize how much we don't know. We cannot even begin to imagine the work that is being done up there. Decades of streamlining systems have made it so that we don't have to be aware of any of what's going on. In order to understand how this streamlining process is happening in more detail, researchers have commonly studied rats. One study involved recording brain activity levels in rats while learning a task. The rats were placed in the beginning of a maze, and there was a treat at the end. During their time in the maze, the rats' brain activity was monitored. When the rats were first introduced to the maze, their brains lit up in many areas. This shows that a lot of areas are being activated, and more energy is being used. The rats used many, if not all, of their senses to find their way to the treat. Once they found the treat, an association in the brain was built, a new memory. The part I find fascinating about the study is that each time the rat completed the maze, the brain lit up in fewer areas until eventually it took almost no brain power or energy at all to find the treat. Humans operate very similarly. Each time we do the life maze or learn a new task, it gets easier and the brain needs less power to do it. For example, have you driven all the way home from work only to realize that you have no idea how you got there? This is because the brain has streamlined the process so that it takes almost no conscious effort on your part to get home. This helps explain why we arbitrarily decide to change the way we eat or do things on a regular basis. It is not enough to cook the meals or write down a list of things you would like to change about yourself. This is a much more complicated process of changing habits. We'll go deeper into this process of changing habits in Chapter 4. And allow the brain to change as well as its well-traveled neural pathways. Are you starting to feel a little bit better about all those failed attempts to make dramatic changes overnight? As I mentioned before, the brain is responsible for an innumerable amount of tasks. In fact, there is so much we don't know about the brain. It is impossible at this time to know exactly how many tasks it does on a daily basis or truly what the brain needs as far as nutrients in order to operate optimally. So far, we know that humans are born with more storage than could ever be used, more neurons than could ever be needed. As the brain becomes more developed, it begins to specialize areas for specific tasks. It does this in order to simplify the necessary processes for basic human life. As we learn new things, new habits are formed, new neural pathways are built, and the communication speed between the brain and the body strengthens. Every time a new habit is formed, the process is the same. The brain must integrate and build a memory pathway for each new item, hobby, person, place, animal, and so forth. To add to it all, the brain is incredibly lazy when it comes to making life changes. Let me tell you a little story about Suzanne. For the last 30 years, Suzanne has been waking up at 7 a.m. She brushes her teeth and heads to the kitchen to pour a cup of coffee. Next, she makes herself a bowl of oatmeal and gets ready for work. Every time Suzanne repeated this pattern, her brain used the same steps each time. This further solidified her process, making it an effortless habit. Because the activity was the same every day, it took very little energy to complete these tasks. It felt very natural. One day, Suzanne went to the doctor for her regular checkup, where she learned her blood pressure was a little high and that adding a daily walk would help her avoid medication or future problems. It seems simple enough. It's only 20 minutes, right? Suzanne should have no problem fitting it in. I wouldn't be surprised if already today you have told yourself that you are going to make a change. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to quit smoking. Starting Monday, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week. This is the last cookie I'm going to eat until Christmas. The problem isn't willpower or food addiction, although they certainly play a role. It takes a considerable amount of energy and thought to change or create a new habit. Have you ever walked into the office, grabbed a donut, and halfway through eating it remembered, oh, you're on a diet, oh crap. The brain was following the normal pathway. The real problem is that you have not been doing these things routinely and that a new pathway will not grow overnight. Each time a pattern is followed in a daily life, a pathway in the brain is also strengthened. Getting down on yourself for not changing a habit or a long-time behavior overnight is fruitless. Sometimes we have very little control over the things we do because the brain has developed shortcuts for habitual tasks and will be very reluctant to change those shortcuts. There is good reasoning behind this. Fighting with yourself. The brain is equally divided into two parts, each capable of operating without the other. This was proven back in 1987 when 3-year-old named Jody was diagnosed with Rasmussen's encephalitis, a rare disease that caused almost constant seizures in half of her brain. The only option for her at the time was to have half of the brain affected by the disease removed. Jody recently became a speech pathologist and has almost no physical or mental limitations. This was a serious breakthrough in neurological research, and it has value here because it shows that both sides of the brain can operate independently. I always found it funny that little kids talk to themselves, not in conversation with an imaginary friend, but just helping themselves work things out. In college, I took a developmental class where the professor asked the question, when do we stop talking to ourselves? This is an easy one, I thought. I was a nanny at the time, and I had seen the children grow out of this stage. Then she answered herself, and I felt quite silly. We never do. We just internalize our self-talk. I often work things out better with myself than when I'm talking with someone else. The brain having two sides allows us to have varying opinions and ideas about things. It even allows us to have silly arguments with ourselves about whether or not to have dessert. Imagine that you're going to eat and a server approaching with a dessert tray. One half of you, the emotional side, is craving sugar and feels entitled to a treat, but the other half cares about your longevity and health, so you fight both sides. This is where willpower comes in. You're being pulled by two horses, each wanting to go in a different direction, and willpower is the ability to guide them in the middle. We are not privy to even half of the things going on in our brain. In fact, if the information were readily available to us, research shows it would actually slow down our processes. Charles Duhigg, in his book, The Power of Habit, gives an example of a tennis player. If he wants to play on the court at Wimbledon, he has to have his moves automated, this taking years of training and memorizing millions of tiny movements. The brain stores and catalogs that information in order to give us the ability to easily move through life. If our brains did not automate these systems, we would have a difficult time getting through life. Imagine trying to touch type and thinking about where all the letters are. It isn't challenging, is it? When something has been burned into the brain, the way down deep, we no longer have to think about it. Thus, it uses far less energy and allows the brain to not work as hard. In order to make lasting changes, it is important to know that the change is possible and easy if we know the way. Action steps. Write a detailed description of your current daily routine. What time do you wake up? Do you drink coffee in the morning? Do you eat the same thing for breakfast or drive the same place for work every day? Include as much detail as you possibly can. Next, where in your daily routine can you make adjustments that best suit your new health goals? Can you wake up earlier or go to bed earlier? Can you find a few minutes every day for stretching routine or time for reflection? Next, write out your ideal daily routine. What would you do every minute of the day if you were not tied to a schedule? Are there any adjustments you can make to your current routine that would make it match your ideal routine without making any major shifts in your life? Okay, see you for the next one.